Good morning, everyone. This is your Monday morning word with Evangelist Karen, and your word for this week is executed. The Lord began to talk to me, and He said, He's giving some of His children some plans in this season that they're going to have to execute, and they cannot deviate from what it is that He has told them to do. You're going to have to follow the direction of the Lord like never before. The Proverbs 16:3 says, "Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established." How many of you, God has given you plans in this season and you want to see them established? Well, when you commit yourself to those plans, commit yourself unto the Lord. To execute simply means to carry it out, to put it into plan, to execute a plan of order or a course of action. He said to tell his children today to execute it. I need somebody to type in the comments, "I will execute it." So then we want to talk about Nehemiah. He was one who executed the plans of God, and he wasn't worried about anything or anybody. Nehemiah had a burden for the people of Israel. He had a burden for the city. The walls were torn down, the gates were torn down, and he had a burden to rebuild this. Why? Because if you understood anything about those walls and those gates not being built, you would understand that it left the people of Israel vulnerable to attack. He didn't want to see his people vulnerable to attack, but Nehemiah was in a position that wouldn't just allow him to just pick up and just leave and just do what he wanted to do. And so the Lord put a burden upon him. What is it, a burden? His burden was to rebuild the walls and the gates. And so now he has to go before his king, and he has to let his king know what is on his mind. And guess what? First he had a burden, then he had favor with that king. Some people think that favor with the king just comes by being a child of God, but the favor of the king doesn't just come. See, his favor, it didn't come because of his position, my God. His favor didn't come because he knew the king. His favor came because of how he served in his position. Woo! Who am I talking to on this morning? You want the favor of God, but the favor of God will come to you according to how you serve in the position it is that you have been given by the king. My God, on today, somebody say it's commitment that's going to get me favor. My God, it's how I do it that's going to get me favor. And then the Bible says that after he found the favor, he got everything that he needed. Then he went to the walls and he did what? He began to assess the damage of the walls. He began to assess the gates. He began to assess the damage and what was going to be needed in order to rebuild this city, to rebuild these walls, right? So first he had a burden, then he had favor, and now he had to assess the damage. After he assessed the damage, he counted up the cost. You never build anything or execute anything without first counting up the cost. If you don't count up your cost, then you probably will run out or lose and not be able to finish what it is that you're supposed to finish. Somebody type in the comments, execute. It is a time and a season for us to execute the plan of God. We got to execute and do what it is that God told us to do. We have to follow it. 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. You cannot deviate from it. You cannot make shortcuts in this season. You have got to execute that thing according to how God gave you the instruction to it. You've got to be committed, not so much committed to man, but be committed unto the Lord, and everything that he told you that he would do will be established. But you've got to execute it, just like Nehemiah. He had a Sanballat and a Tobiah. They were on his heels. They talked about him. They tried to set him up. They tried to tell him that they was going to kill him. But he was so committed, my God, to executing the plan of God that he just turned a deaf ear to them. He didn't even think about them. He was just focused on finishing what it is that he was set out to do. See, you've got to stop worrying about what people say. You've got to stop worrying about what people think. If God gave you a plan, execute that plan to the fullest. Right, cross every T, dot every I, according to how it is that God gave it to you. You cannot deviate from the plan of God in this season, but you have to execute it. My God, on today, he was in a high-ranking position, but he understood that this burden that I got, my God, it's got to be executed, my God, on today. So so he executed the plan of God, just like you have got to execute the plan of God for your life. And the Lord told me as I was even preparing for this, he said to tell the people, some of you are using old plans to execute things in a new season. My God, you are using old plans to execute things in a new season. You've got to go over those plans, update and revise those plans, because we are in a new dispensation, and the plans of 2020, they not go work for 2021, because this is a new season. This is a new era of what it is that God is getting ready to do in the earth. So you got to take those old plans, you've got to revise them, update them, and execute them in this season. What you did in 2021 is not going to work in 2022 unless you revive, unless you update and execute what it is that God has told you to execute. It's just like if you were getting ready to build a house. First you find the land, then you do what? You excavate the land and they start to build the foundation. You don't excavate the land and then start putting up walls. Why? Because it will be of no use to you. You will not be able to do what it is that God called you to do if you didn't execute it. 1, 2, 3. There are steps into building. Nehemiah understood the steps. He understood how it needs to be executed. And we need to understand the execution, and the plans of God in this season are going to be vital in anything you do, but you've got to execute it. You cannot delay. You cannot be distracted. You cannot listen to the words of the enemy, and you surely cannot listen to doubt. When God is giving you a plan, when God is giving you assignment, you have to execute the assignment, regardless to if people think that you can fulfill it or not. My God, on today, I would not be where I am today if I listened to people tell me not to execute and do what it is that God has called me to do in this season. You are going to have to execute these plans. You're going to have to update some assignments and revise some plans so that they can fit in this dispensation, so that you can do what it is that God called you to do. Somebody write in the comments, execute. I'm executing it. I'm executing it. You've got to execute in this season. You've got to be committed in this season. Not so much to man, but you've got to be committed to the Lord. Anything that you want established in this season, you've got to make sure that your partner, he said, tell somebody your business partner needs to be the Lord in this season. And if you are attached or committed or hooked up with somebody that don't serve the Lord thy God, then you got to make sure that you are put God in the forefront. Why? Because he needed to be executed like he needed to be executed. You would never build something without counting up the cost of it. He said, tell my children in this season, everything that I have played out, because he told me, he said, I gave my children some specific plans. Woo! He said, I gave you some specific plans in this season, and you're going to have to execute those plans according to the diagram that I gave you. My God, don't deviate, from the instruction. Don't deviate from the plan. Don't deviate from what it is that he told you to do in this season. Or you'll come up short. I need somebody to write in this time and say comments. I'm executing it. I'm committed to the Lord. Right? I'm committed to God. I will execute my plans and they will be established. Somebody write in the comments, I'm established. I will be established. I will be established. 2021 will be a year that I will be established. My God, I will be established and I will execute the plans of God, the purpose and the plan that he set before the foundations of the earth. This is the year that he will execute it. He will establish it. If you commit your ways unto him, he will execute, and establish you in this season. Some people thought last year was the season. Some people thought 2020 was the season. Some people thought that years before that it was their season. But this is the season that God will establish his kingdom. He will establish his children like never never before. But you've got to execute the plan. You've got to execute your purpose. You've got to execute your destiny, my God, and what it is that he's called you to execute in this season. Write the vision. Make it plain. He said, don't worry about the people. I'll send the people. Just execute the plan. Nehemiah went in building. He didn't know who all was going to be there when he built, but when he got there, he was able to execute it because God had already established those who would help rebuild the walls. My God, on today, stop looking for certain people. God says, I'm going to send them, and you will execute in this season what it is that I have told you to execute. Do not deviate. Do not listen to Sanballat, and surely don't listen to Tobiah. Execute the assignment in this season. You cannot use old plans to execute things in a new season. We are in a different dispensation. It is time for you to revise. It is time for you to update so that it fits the dispensation that we are in right now. Somebody says, I'm committed. Write in the comments, I'm committed. Write in the comments, I'm committed. And I will execute everything it is that God told me to execute according to the purpose and the plan that he has set, not what you think. If you commit your ways to God, he will establish you in this season like never before. Will you be established, or will you fall by the wayside? He said, tell my children, execute it. God bless you all. Have an awesome